Hello and welcome to DXdao's January Priorities Board discussion, the first such discussion here. I'm going to share a screen before we actually get into that. Here. So let me make this full screen. Okay, I guess it's not as big as it could be. So just kind of quick review of agenda. So where things stand, kind of how we got here and what we're kind of trying to do with this new initiative app demo. So Sky has been talking with someone and working on something kind of, I think, it would be really helpful to be able to run this kind of whole initiative. So I think a key thing that we're trying to do with the priorities board is reach consensus on what DXDAO's priorities are. And to reach consensus, we can't just talk on these calls and come to some agreement. You have to vote at the end of the day. And the way that we vote with DXdao is we use governance power, an on-chain governance power right now that is rep. In the future, that'll be rep in DXD. So hopefully we'll get to in a little bit is basically a demo of an app that someone is working that allows you to translate on-chain token balances or rep in this case and be able to assign weights to that so that you could then do ranked choice voting with that. So we'll kind of look over that. We're hoping maybe we could have a demo to be used for this first month, but if not, maybe it could be used the next month after. A little overview of what the voting and process will look like, and then what are some I think I have an overview of what it is, and maybe then there's some new additions, and then looking at both the DXDAO's priorities overall, and then the guild priorities one specifically. So the 5 different guilds that receive funding, and looking at what those priorities are, and then just kind of next steps from here. And I think under the guild priorities discussion, I think Ross from DXGov has some ideas on how to execute on DXDAO, on DXGov's priorities there. So we can talk about that a little. So this is the beginning. That could have been a quote. We're trying to figure out how to have a new thing here and a new governance structure. So we'll take some time to figure out. And so when things need time to be figured out, I like to use my favorite saying, 摸着石头过河, which is cross the river by feeling the stones. So we're going to be doing that again here. Where we are, I think right now, I think if you go back, let's say pre-Columbia, so before Columbus land, before Bogota, I think there was, we have these priorities. Maybe there's not a lot of clarity, but I think going through that process and then going through some of the restructuring stuff on the vision, but also I think a lot of the budget stuff where we're putting forth these ideas that we want. We've already kind of done some of the work on maybe where some of the priorities are now, and I think that's helpful. So part of this is recognizing that, but I imagine this is not just something for right now, but how will priorities kind of change into the future. And I guess we can. I'll wait for this app demo and just kind of talk about what we're thinking about the voting and process here. So as I said, this is meant to be a monthly update. And so the priorities board right now, as we've laid it out, does not have any enforcement element to it. This is in no way a directive to any individual contributor or any specific guild to be you need to do this on Monday or do this kind of on Wednesday. It is a signal from DXDAO governance on what it sees as the priorities, both for DXDAO overall and the individual guilds. So all we're really trying to do right now is provide signal, and then it's up to kind of the guilds themselves to execute on that, individual contributors. Obviously, that signal will come in handy, I think, in several months when we're looking at budgets for the second half of the year, and it'll be okay, well, how much did the guild's output align with the priorities that were established at the time? So this will be the monthly meeting and a follow-up summary on DAO Talk. I'm guessing I probably will not try to do the monetary policy in this meeting in the same week, but we'll figure out an exact time and try to get it the same time of month. But we'll have a monthly meeting and then a follow-up summary on DAO Talk for those that are a little bit more text inclined. And then we will have new submissions. So if there are new priorities, new things that we should be thinking about that are not currently on the board, we'll be open to those submissions either on this call or on that thread for 2 days after the meeting. and we'll get to how we implement this. But the idea would be you could be a new submission if you had 15% of voting power, in this case, reputation behind it. And then we'll have a bit of time here for discussion. So it'll be 7 days after here when the actual rank vote will take place. And so that would be, as we discussed a little bit here, there's 2 days for new submissions, and then basically 5 days for people to, maybe discuss things on the forum, maybe think about things a little bit more before that's actually put to vote. And so, this is what we're kind of thinking now, 5 days vote. And then from that, again, you have some signal of this is what DXdao is prioritizing right now. And then we just kind of do the same process, 3 weeks later. So hopefully this is, comes routine a little bit. And there are a lot of things that are the same every month. And we're really focusing on really only like the changes to certain things. And I'm thinking like, say, governance 2.0 or some of the other things, like those are pretty, we don't really need to discuss that much about these priorities that we already have consensus over. I think it's really on what are the new additions, and then what are things that maybe need to be raised or lowered in the priority discussion as changes for that month. And I can keep going here, Sky, if that's right, Lewis.
Yeah. I don't know where he went, but I can also talk about it high level and a few thoughts about it if you want me to do that now, or
and actually I think I still have, can I share it or screenshot that?
Yeah. That's you can show that as a thing, but I'm just gonna kind of overview explain it because it also relates to what you just talked about there. So this app, this was just I was just looking at the comments. This is just a test instance of it. The idea of it being used for something else for testing, but the idea of this this app that we want to use for priorities, you can think of it as a mix of. We've all here used Coordinate, and then we also, some people might know what conviction voting is. And so Coordinate is like usually a snapshot in time. Like we all participate and then we get a snapshot and we take some action based on the snapshot of that. In this app, it's going to be more like, I don't know if you've seen Gardens by One Hive, but conviction voting is people have a certain amount of power. And so this power is probably going to be determined by your rep that you hold. And then it can also be determined by people that have DXD that would like to participate in this priorities ranking as well. And so I floated some rough formulas for how to determine a voting power based on your rep or your DXD in the Operations Guild and also in the DXGov, because there's a lot of things related to like how this could tie into Davi and DXGov and governance in general. So everyone that wants to be a stakeholder in priorities board, which is you're either a rep holder or you're a DXD holder that wants to participate, you're going to have some amount of voting power, and we would have a list of the priorities, and people can add new priorities if they want. But on like a live basis for like some period of time, so we could either do it on a monthly basis or even the quarterly basis, you get to assign your voting power divided up between the priorities that you think DXdao should focus on the most. And it actually is a live, always continuous voting mechanism. So if at any time, if you decide that other priorities can move higher, you can actually then adjust your power that's flowing towards those initiatives. And so not only does it allow us to have snapshots at points in time, it allows you to see how that changes over time. So throughout like the month or throughout the quarter. This screenshot is an example. So of actual amounts getting voting power associated to them, and then you can rank it by the total TVS, I guess, which is like total value score, and that will show like the then current. So it does take into account, let's see, people keep joining. I'm just looking if Lewis is joining. I don't know where he went. I talked to him like an hour ago and told him to show up, but he's a hacker.
But I did. You can see I just like added this one here, and you have like 100 on there. I think I tried to add. Maybe I haven't to these other ones, but you could kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually this is like an old version of it. It's been fully redone and is a lot better than this, I think. We should be able to start testing or using it this week at some point. There's just like some finishing touches being done on it. So I think it's going to look quite a bit different than this. But that's the idea of this tool. I think if DXdao starts to use it, and I think it's going to be an effective way to determine priorities. There is in the beginning, we will have kind of admins, just like we do with Coordinate, admins that help set it up. But eventually you'd be able to like pull in rep and pull in DXD automatically into a system that would then give you live voting power. And at some point, maybe this becomes, this could be like almost a DApp or a widget within Davi or something like that as well. So I think it's a tool that if DXdao starts using, we can give feedback. They can make changes that we think make it better, and it actually could become. It starts driving, where a big on-chain DAO is focusing its attention. I think that actually becomes an interesting tool for other communities to use as well, and so we can be one of the first to experiment with it.
But yeah, you can just see right here. So I added this one for 100, and then I voted for this proposal notification bot, which I actually think would be a great thing. And I put 100 on it, and it was down here at 50, and so it just kind of moved up. And so obviously these are different things, but we would have basically like one of these for DXdao, and then hopefully we can do one of these for each of the guilds, and then you presumably have kind of the same voting power across them, but it would be, I think a healthy tool. And I mean, a lot of things we say about dog feeding DXdao and building other tooling. I think this would be a very effective, I think, DAO tooling, and maybe be used by others. I know like a lot of like Maker obviously signals a lot with polling, but there's a lot of other, I think, opportunities there. Cool. Let me get off of this one and go back to the slides. Okay. Cool. All right. So then DXdao priorities discussion. So this is where we have the first version, I guess, of this thing, this board here. And I think I have talked to people about this, but of course I don't think I have. There's been no voting process on this, so this is nowhere official. But when you start these things, they do need to have something in kind of an ordering here. And so, I guess just to kind of like briefly touch on again, I think these are maybe even more consensus of what things are, maybe than even my individual opinions, but I'm, again, happy to, and you can quibble with a lot of these. So I still think like the DXdao top overall priority is governance 2.0. I think that involves a lot of different things. I think you could really put even some of the stuff, I think, with the DXD token working group actually end up under that one too, because it really is just about like unifying that. There's the new DXD token model implementation, which I think has been a huge priority over the last month or so, and then developing a flagship product vision and mission. This is coming out of the restructuring and refocus proposal, and kind of driving that. And we have Davi, internal and external, kind of splitting those up a little bit. And we just kind of go through the products right here. Davi internal, Davi external, Carrot. Swapper front end, we split that one up a little bit because I think a little bit more focus on the kind of the front end. Again, this is from the DAO's perspective here. Recruiting, I think, is a priority. We've actually done, I think, a good job of filling in that already, and I think there's a lot more we can do. And there's a big opportunity in this, say, bull market. In this bear market, to build up and attract some great talent. Community outreach, always a priority. Financial reporting, I think maybe this kind of ties a little bit in the DXD model implementation, so could probably actually maybe think about it, drop off this. But then, yeah, just some other things on here that I think are DXdao overall organizational improvements, Swapper, like the on-chain element a little bit there. And again, maybe one of these is moving up into this 10th one now that I think about it. Token holder outreach, I think this is something we've kind of improved on, but it is something that we're actually like focusing on and getting them more involved. DXdao branding as well. That's something maybe that's not a top priority there. And then I guess before we like maybe talk about those for a little bit, I just want to like draw your attention. We will talk about these in a second, but like there is a relationship between, we have DXdao priorities and guild priorities. And so I guess the question is like, do they need to like perfectly overlap, or how much should they kind of play off of each other? I think they are very much like at least important signals that DXdao will want to have it as a good thing. So it's less about an enforcement or something that needs to be kind of acted upon. It's more about like the signal that can be interpreted by different groups. I think the key thing is they probably shouldn't conflict that much, right? You shouldn't say that this is a priority for DXdao, but it's not a priority for a guild. But again, that's going to be how the vote ends up happening. But I think we don't really need to make any hard or fast rules about it, but just know that there is some relationship between the two, and we want to be voting on kind of how those go there. So yeah, I guess maybe just to open it up here in terms of like, DXdao's overall focus. Is there anything that maybe we're missing that could be taken down from there, or any serious kind of discussion on some of the different rankings for it? I don't think we want to get into, this one's a little bit higher than that one, or this one's a little bit higher than that one. I think some of that is dependent on like how we end up voting. But I think, is there any big omissions, or maybe things that we want to reword is another thing? Like what exactly kind of are these things that are important? But yeah, any initial reactions to the DXdao version? All right, well, we can go into the individual ones in a second that I've put together. Need Jeopardy moves is a good point. Yeah, that's what I was kind of saying before when we were back in this thing. Like, I think we have worked to get to some of these consensus like now through the last several months. So I think like we're not as maybe like, we talked a lot about the Swapper, kind of where Swapper's going. And I think like I think Swapper's in a good place now, and is kind of, maybe I would like quibble and like maybe care is a little bit higher between these, or kind of there, but you can kind of just see like all the products are here as top priorities. But these are kind of key things that are like, DXdao cross wide there. And so I think just going to read CMandy 3. And it says, I think the DXD model implementation plays heavily into other priorities as well. Solidifying the new model, governance ties directly into that model. The community will be more in tune with the new token model as well. We can see the influx of personalities having a say of what's going on with the new model, increases governance discussion, lots of different things. He says he's just spitballing there, also on a mini phone. And I think that's, a good, say, byproduct of the model, that it does introduce like new stakeholder incentive alignment. So I think just having more DXD holders interested in what's actually happening with product development is very important. And I think you only get that when you have this like close tie between what the rep holders, contributors, what the treasury, and what DXD holders have access to. So I think that is a good byproduct for that, and also I think introduces some financial discipline to DXdao overall. Cool. Yeah, and then looking at the operations one, we have let's do this here. Enact restructuring refocus proposal. Shout out! You can check my Twitter retweets. There was a great Medium article, and also DAO Talk post from Keenan at the end of last week, kind of reviewing where the status is of everything on that. And I think really as operations guild, like that's one of the top priorities is really just kind of getting that set up, and you can kind of see where we are on that. I think from the operations guild side, there's really like 3 components to that. There's the budget, which we've passed and kind of implemented the first half of 2023 one. Then there's this priorities board, which we're talking about now. And then the third element is the DXD monetary policy committee that we're going to meet on Thursday on that. Now, related to that, I think executing on the new DXD token model, and I think there has, it's been some activity, but I think there's been a lot of progress, I think, on that in the last couple of weeks, and I think it's okay to recognize that the output of that discussion, argument, whatever we want to call it, was, I think, a very effective governance move and decision, and a very big one, I guess, in terms of the member balancers that have gone through. So I think, as you said, there was about a $3.5 million member balancer that went through last week, and there's about $2 million worth of member balancers that are set to go through, I think, this week. I have not had a chance to look and verify all of them, but I think Dave has voted on them, and they, quick glance, look good to me. So I think that's kind of like the first initial executing on the new DXD token model, and I think that takes some overhead in doing that. And then there are a couple different other ways of executing on that. There's been about $500,000 more of DXdao liquidity that has been put into Swapper for the DXD WETH pair there. So that gives instant liquidity to anyone through that as well. And then the next one, we've had a lot of, I guess there's 3 types of cow swap orders, right? So it's really cool. We're kind of experimenting that. But the big one that we have now, so you have the limit order, which you can do is set on that. And then the second one you have is you can basically do like a market buy. So you can buy anything at that one. But we just started this liquidity order type, which basically allows you to have a limit order, but it's not a limit order that's fill or kill, meaning it will be, you could access it for days after that. There's one that is live right now that was put $500,000. Unfortunately, it was put at like 1,300 ETH prices. So it is, I think, buying at like $586 of DXD. So that has not been picked up at all. There is, but it's still on the books, I guess, for another couple days there. So if ETH drops or if DXD someone looks to sell a lot, you could access that liquidity order. There is another liquidity order for 400 WETH that is currently, I think it's 3 days away from passing now. So unlike the USDC order, which moves a lot based upon the price of ETH, the ETH order, I think, was at like 0.42 or something. So that will be a very big order that will, I think, that'll kind of probably be the largest single order, I think, of DXD that you've seen so far. And that's kind of the inverse bonds. The other Ross G and I have been chatting about this a lot this week, and kind of what that means for the model and how we can kind of like incorporate that. I think there is still a little bit of like thinking on the policy side, or like what are we actually trying to encourage and grow, and like how does this action actually feed into and help improve the products, help DXD holders, and kind of whatever. I think, as you were saying before, the 70% price floor guarantee, or this like new DXD model, it does help already kind of align interest already. It does a lot of work there. And I think like the next step is figuring out how to optimize that. So you have maybe people that are more bullish on DXdao want to take like a bigger risk, or in some way these inverse bonds are an opportunity that they can kind of like potentially get a higher return by both like locking up their DXD for a while, but maybe also taking a bet on the treasury in some way. So we are going to provide an update on that on Thursday on the DXD Monetary Policy Committee meeting.
Chris, Lewis is here now. If you want to do the demo.
Why don't we just go through these operations and then we'll do it in like 2 minutes if that's cool.
Sweet. Sweet.
So you got to think that's kind of like governance stuff, and then you have like treasury stuff, and we have, and the other thing we actually have in terms of like recruiting and contributor X. So I think having Solidity that is incredibly important. And I think it's a major priority, probably the top priority of the contributor X squad. And so we have that, and then we're also looking for a treasury manager. Kind of been chatting about that. I need kind of what that looks like. This week, there's been a lot of applicants, both individuals and entities, that have applied and are interested in. So I think that's something we want to figure out how we'll do that going forward. So that's something. Then we have, we want to flesh out the idea of this legal squad and the DevOps and security squad, and make that a little bit more of a real thing with Yerrick and Augusto on that. I think a priority of the Operations Guild, which maybe not as much as maybe the other ones, is like I think the Operations Guild is now maybe the only one that has responsibility for like weekly calls. So you have, I think that's a somewhat big priority there. So both the developer one and also the governance one there. And then just some other things to be thinking about here. Treasury deployment, is that something that we want to prioritize? We want to get the Treasury doing more things in different areas. That's something that could be acted on. Contributor onboarding, I think it's always like a priority, but maybe not like enough of one. And then looking at, stakeholder risk analysis is just an example of something maybe that the legal squad could look into a little bit in looking at what are the risks to different stakeholders in the DXdao ecosystem. So I don't know if there are any questions on that there or comments. We could turn it over to Lewis for a demo here, if there aren't any. Cool.
Sweet. I'll just introduce Lewis. Lewis is a contributor to a bunch of stuff in the space and kind of a hacker. He used to do a bunch with DORG, but he floats around the space, and he and a couple others came up with this idea, I think this past summer. Lewis, I described it high level. You can see here, like, DXdao and the different guilds have different priorities, which are unranked right now. Everyone here is also familiar with Coordinape and also has some knowledge about conviction voting. And I kind of explained how this new priorities ranking system is a mix of all of those things. But and we actually just shared like the old version of what it looked like that was tested out during December. But it would be awesome if you could talk through the latest and then show anything you have that might interest the people.
All right, cool. Hey everyone. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation in the intro. And this project just started off as a little hack at this DAO gathering, like residency we were at. The idea being, could we kind of dog food something at the time to better capture our own like internal like preferences and signaling and coordinate our own behaviors right over the like 1 or 2 week period that we were together at that residency. And then it kind of grew from there. So that's probably what you saw or interacted with before, was that first iteration, which was like a much more simple, like smart contract, right? That's essentially just of like capturing your, you have like a 1,000 points, and then those points get allocated towards like a topic indexed by a string, and then it's kind of like on-chain capturing, preferences that way. And then when I got a small grant to continue building it, um, and then like picking up some ideas from Zargum at the time and learning about more like composable Solidity frameworks, I was thinking of the notion like could we make this like very like how modular, how composable can we make this? Can we make that into a thing where you can like reuse all the components? Can we make this into a thing where you can like deploy at every level like um, your own components, right? Of who's allowed to signal like in a particular instance, who's allowed to like how many points everyone has, or like how that's determined, like any of that logic essentially just kind of like wire together a state machine, right? For this type of signaling, which is also extensible to even let's say like treasury management, token curated registries and so forth. So I think moves like smoothly between kind of this idea of soft social signaling and preferences right within an organization, and then potentially even like integrating with like treasury management and other like automated processes, based on results of these systems. So let's see. I can maybe the best thing I could do is because I think you just saw like the old front end. Working with Ven, and we're gonna redeploy like the new contract system into a new front end or by like today or tomorrow. So it'd be useful to get like your guys' feedback on perhaps like exactly what type of like mechanism might work for your organization. But I guess the last thing I'll show you is maybe like a short wire diagram of like how everything's stitched together, and hopefully that makes it a bit more clear. Okay. Okay. So there we go. So yeah, and I built this using the MUD framework, which if anyone's heard of it, is for like on-chain gaming, but it's very useful for like just like a general composable state management systems. And for that, and that's where like the really interesting part of like being able to wire together like the logic of your what I call a signal stream, right? That's a stream is like an abstraction for like a single instance, like capturing signaling activities. And so there's like a single router, and that router is connected to components that say like, okay, which systems are allowed to signal for which streams. And then there's like the stream owner registry, right? That's kind of outside of this scope. It's more like admin of like, okay, what, like you own stream one, right? Like, or anyone can just claim a uint 256 as whatever stream that they want. But then they have their admin privileges. They could say, okay, you can call these top level systems, meaning that like in the context of the stream, here's like the permissible functions you can call. Here's the permissible functions that can update component state. And like here's how we determine our like user membership. Maybe that's like a hard-coded address. Maybe that's linking to a DAO contract, whatever. So all of that can be custom configured, and then once configured, like reused over and over again without having to like deploy any new contracts, by like making all of these lookups, and then like at every step of the way making sure that people are within the scope of the stream registered to signal. And again, like even the scope of the signal is like arbitrary, and like components can be made, and the components are simply like very simple like state storage contracts on chain that store a particular type of state. And then, and this is like in the context of the MUD framework, all events get emitted as bytes. And then the components have a schema that allow you to know how to decode, right, any particular event. So, but you only need one subgraph to listen to like all of the events from all of the streams, and then to like decode them for like any particular stream. So that's kind of like the big idea. It's like, okay, we'll start, and like, the first use case will, be quite as simple as, what you've been seeing in terms of, okay, we're going to like, everyone has like a certain amount of points. In this case, maybe we'll like, hard code it based on, like admins who like determine, okay, these users have this many points, and then play with that. But the idea is, it's like very easy to like mutate, without having to redeploy like a significant amount of like front end, back end, and contract infrastructure, and like change the rules, add new logic, you make it like quadratic, make it hit up a DAO contract, or like anything in between, and kind of permissionlessly allow you to like stitch these instances together. And then, of course, like there's nothing stopping this system also from like plugging into logic for, like value transference at some point. All right, I think that's kind of the main gist. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to briefly answer them now.
That last thing you just said, Lewis, quite futuristic, like this priority board's determining the priorities and which guilds those come from, and then like the money streaming out of DXdao into those guilds on a live basis based on the live voting power allocation is really cool. But we don't need that.
Yeah.
But in the future, maybe.
Yeah, again, I think what's really cool about kind of the affordances inherited from this like MUD architecture here is like, because it's so compartmentalized, and you look at it and it's like, oh wow, why are we like doing 12 like contract calls to update a state variable? And granted, that could probably be like compressed down considerably, and this is definitely something that's like much better to operate on, let's say like Gnosis chain, where it still costs like less than a penny per transaction. But yeah, but essentially that modularity and composability extends itself to like reuse across like all levels of the stack, to the point where if with enough components, and like existing contracts, system like logic and component stores, you can even just say like, okay, here's what I want my stream to look like, and maybe it's like a wire diagram, right, of like, okay, like people can do this, and then like the contracts update state in this way, and blah blah blah, and this is how like we determine every part of that, and then that like wire diagram would just be like imminently interfacing with like the structure of the back end. Yeah.
Did you have a screenshot of the new front end or not?
Let's see. I could boot it, but I mean it's pretty much like the same. I think Ven just like added some like colors and but
and so Lewis, and I was just using the demo a little bit before, and so is that all on chain? Because when I was using the demo, I was like sending a transaction to Gnosis chain, and so like I guess is that even that calculation of the voting power happening on chain, or is that what is just what's happening on chain is like I just like gave 100 thumbs up to one and 50 thumbs up to never. So just that information is stored on chain.
Right. Yeah, that's like all of that state is stored on chain. Yeah. So it says just like using the database as like a registry for that signal.
Cool. Very cool. Who knew priorities board monthly meeting, you'd be getting a sweet technical overview. But yeah, that's awesome. And I guess like we're still, as I said, this is something we want to do every month, and like we're trying to build a process on it. So we're this is the first month of it, but we are kind of in it for, we think, for the long haul here. So we're hoping to like start voting like 1 week from now. And so for that, what we would want is that we would actually have like 6 different boards, 1 for DXdao overall, and then 5 different mini boards. They would have the same voting power like breakdown. So you each address would have the same amount of voting power regardless of the board, but you would have different amounts to give per board. And so, yeah, that's what we were kind of hoping. I don't know if we'd be able to do that in a week, or maybe we could look for next month. But yeah, I mean, I think this is, a lot of the things we're looking for. And I just think polling and signaling is like so huge, is like kind of an unsolved problem. Ooh, look at that.
Sorry, I have to like quickly
Just crashed.
delete this file. Okay. Yeah, so if you're talking about like, from what I understood, your needs are like, you want essentially now kind of like the same voting schema, more or less, or like the system is set up in the same way, but you want like multiple independent instances that maybe like have different permissions, or is like mutated in a different way, if I understand correctly.
Probably the only difference would be they need to have their own independent like currency, right? And they would need to have their own individual signals. So you'd basically just have 6 different boards where you're ranking things. But the people who could vote on those, even like the admins or whatever, those could be the same. It's only like the voters will have the same voting power, but just across different boards. I mean, it'd be fine if at first instance, if we were just able to do 1 board, I think that would also be fine, because basically what we have is we have 1 big board for DXdao, and then we're creating these like 5 little mini boards for we have guilds, kind of like departments or whatever. So it would be great if we could do all of them, but the DXdao is probably the main one. That's the big one.
Right, and again, so I think that's kind of another like great value add of this type of architecture. So you can just like reuse, let's say in this case, you want to reuse the same like member registry, right? So like you'll like set up your member registry like somehow, and maybe have some like admin over that. But then you can like plug in multiple streams that like listen to that registry, but operate independently right within the context of that stream. And so like this is where, again, it's kind of like, a process of like experimentation and kind of thinking about and playing with like what you really want, right? And so I would even say like, try to write down explicitly, or even like diagram how you think, you want these systems to work, because those could be like, these ideas could be more or less like easily integrated. If you want like, okay, well, we only, on this one, on the current board, you can like, you can create a signal for any string, but let's say you want it already in like a bounded domain. Okay, well, that's like, a feature that would need to be implemented into a system. It's like simple logic, but would like change how that system works, right? So like thinking like that. So in this first iteration, yeah, it's like open. Anyone can, signal something and like add points and remove points, and you'll be able to see that coming here in the front end. But yeah, any additional logic or like features, I'd say just like make a note of them, because that's kind of like the whole point of this kind of the architecture, is like making it easy to upgrade and experiment with.
Yeah, sweet.
And yeah, I think like it's definitely it's already set up for like new instances. So like, yes, like all the contracts are built to do it in a certain way where everyone like like references this hard-coded registry of like, address, every address has a certain amount of points that you determine beforehand. But in that framework, like once this is up, you could spin up, like an arbitrary number of instances of that. And then when there's like more systems, right, that plug into the architecture, you could start to spin up instances of those.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah. Excited to iterate on this and kind of, yeah.
And yeah, let me know if, so I could deploy this on, right now it's on Goerli. If you want to do this like first one, within the next week on Gnosis chain or Goerli, like let me know if you have a preference either way on that.
Yeah, we'll Scott, why don't we
Gnosis chain? Having it on Gnosis chain would be better than Goerli. Just there's no reason not to have it on Gnosis chain. Yeah,
everyone like DXdao has DXdao on Gnosis chain or whatever, and has been operating on Gnosis chain. I guess is the most active DXdao chain,
right?
From transactions.
And Louis, I have an initial list of wallets and points based on a formula I came up with for rep, and then bringing DXD holdings into that as well, which I forgot to send you, but either you or like I'm assuming the admin, whoever's the admin can upload that in some manner.
So yeah, again, like I made it this, member points registry is like very simple. And again, it's like a, modular component that at, some point could be easily swapped out. Right. But we're just like adding literally just an array, if you're a valid stream owner, which is part of like the stream abstraction, right? You like register the stream or admin, whatever. Then on that stream, you just call like add users, with like an array of users, an array of points, and doing like a one-time update, for any number of users.
Cool.
And again, so there's like small design considerations, like, this does not allow you to like modify points, right, for users that you already submit to. Again, that would be like another design consideration, and just like keeping these things in mind of like, okay, how you want these systems to work, and like tweaking the internals, I think is how you get like the most value out of it.
Cool.
But Louis, is it still correct that if a new person comes along, like 2 weeks into the live period, and I want to add them with some voting power, I can add it?
Yeah. You can always so this will work. You can always add new people that have not yet been added.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That works well.
Cool. Thanks, Louis. I want to see, hopefully we can finish before the top of the hour. So I want to keep things moving. It's really excited that we can, I think this is exactly the type of DAO tooling that we're kind of looking for, that I think is, matches up with what a DAO actually needs: signaling and voting. And very cool. And also kind of a preview of Gov 2.0, right? Seeing how you can have DXD and reputation contribute to the same voting power and be able to make decisions. So I think it's a great way of kind of getting us started on that road too.
Awesome.
Thanks, Louis.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. Cool. And I just like wanted to go over the rest of these, the ones we kind of have out there, to see if there's any kind of big additions. And so just like a reminder, I think, of what we want to have the next 2 days is kind of make sure we have what all the priorities maybe should be, kind of submit them or do something else, and then have discussion in the forum or anything. And then in 5 days after that, 7 days from now, we can start the voting on that. So for now, I guess we talked about operations, and then I guess we get into voice here. And I think voice is one of those is actually pretty representative maybe of what the DXdao priorities overall is, I guess, especially when it comes related to like the products. So I think with voice here, they have like the first one, or priority here is kind of from the restructure and refocus proposal. This is something that they've been working on, is kind of creating a more cohesive story vision out of like what is DXdao and what does that kind of mean. I think the phrase here, flagship product suite development, and then you have the DXgov branding and go-to-market strategy, Carrot branding, go-to-market strategy, community outreach, and Swapper expeditions and go-to-market strategy, right? So I think you kind of see pretty clearly all of those are their priorities, and to me, this is like a perfect example of like, I'd be really curious to know what people think should be, what DXD and rep holders think should be spent on both of those. And it's not so much that we all will agree, but it's that there will be different, different elements of it. Yeah, and there's just like a kind of, and this kind of gets into Keenan saying, I think elements of the go-to-market strategies have moved up in priority internally, want to create campaigns for Swapper ahead of Denver and like Carrot launching soon, right? So you can see how even if some of the, even if we're thinking, okay, like Davi maybe has like there's like kind of an element to the DAO foundation and being able to like export that into other DAOs, and that's really important. That will take a little bit more time to do. So that can kind of get into like execution there, right? Just because something is a priority doesn't mean you can't execute on other things if there's something that is like holding it up. But that's a good shout. And then something like community outreach, I think, is like just incredibly, it's always a priority, and we always need to make sure that we're like not letting that go down the wayside. And then just a couple others I had under here: voice, developing key partnerships, thinking more of the biz dev, like definitely a priority. Operation decentralization, something I think we can still execute on, even if it is less of a priority from the other ones, because that's something that would kind of roll through there. And then same thing with like kind of DX ventures too as well. So any kind of thoughts, anything additions, anything we're missing from the voice? I didn't put DXdao branding over here. This wasn't over here, kind of because I feel like this is the priority here on the flagship product suite, but that's maybe something once we have some feeling of this one, maybe we do want to have voice executing on a more branding for DXdao.
Branding is definitely on our minds, but I think targeting probably H2, specifically DXdao. I think that will be our target for H2 as like a larger kind of overarching goal.
Man, I just love Keenan saying H2 in January. It's like we're thinking ahead, we're planning. Cool. And then we get into I guess like the products here, which I think are a bit different than when you think of the operations and the voice guild, because like those I think that was I think biz dev is more of like a squad Venki. So like I think biz dev is like what Sky already I think sharing a document on Carrot's go-to-market strategy as well. So I think partnerships would be like a priority under voice that biz dev is executing on. But I kind of think like, for instance, the branding and the go-to-market strategy is probably a higher priority right now than developing partnerships. You can develop partnerships once you have the branding and the go-to-market strategy.
Cool. I mean, I'm just trying to understand the setup.
And then just like Swapper, I think again, so those are a little bit different because those really are operations and voice, a lot about serving DXdao as a whole and maybe different priorities across the products themselves. Right? I think voice is like almost how do you prioritize that, whereas like you get into the product priorities and those are like very specific and do get closer to I think execution. Those maybe a little bit more in the weeds, but the hope of this, having this monthly is that we are giving a general update to DXD holders, rep holders on the priorities that the squads feel about there. And then they can give their kind of feedback there. And so, I think I put, so Swapper, you can kind of see the different one, front end maintenance and bug fixes, network inspection, eco-writer improvement, Swapper expeditions and other user acquisition, splitting swap from Swapper. I was trying to come up with an all S phrase for that one. That's kind of the idea of having these two different ones. I know that Venki and Zet were talking about that this week and relates to DeFi Llama stuff. The other things that we have down here, maybe they're not priorities right now, but could be in the future. The liquidity.eth thing, I guess, relates a little bit to this. Swapper token research as well. And then maybe these could be combined. I don't know, the Uniswap V3 research, or I think the MEV capturing AMM research. That's something from like the Cal folks that I think would be interesting there. And so, yeah, I don't know if there are any omissions or anything that we want to add to that list, Venki or Zet.
I kind of think this looks okay. Yeah.
I think the wording is important for these, and so I know we can maybe talk about the wording for these offline, but like, you know, I'm a sucker for getting the precise wording, and that ends up affecting what these things are. So if we have, yeah, we can kind of work on getting those buttoned up, and especially I think it's important. This is actually, I think, Ross's feedback for DXgov. It's especially important to align how things are referred to, let's say, internally within a guild, and have that be able to relate to the governance, you know, to DXD holders and rep holders in the same language, right? And if we have alignment between those, it makes it easier for things to follow. So I think language is important to nitpick over there. I'm not sure if I assumed what you were saying there, but cool. Anything on Swapper in terms of additional things? Anything cool. And then just because we're gonna close off with it. I have not. Oh, this is bad. We've not fully done the Carrot ones, but I think Carrot is a little bit simpler. I think right now, just because the product is kind of like launch, and partly because it's driven a little bit more by an individual. We don't have as much of the different work streams going right now, but I think the two ones right there. So yeah, this is great too. Oh, here we go. This is for Carrot. Perfect. This is from Venki here. Yeah, and so because again, it's more about like, it's helpful to explain these things to the community so that they kind of understand what's going on. So even when we say ship V1, like clearly there's kind of like, well, it seems to be like the KPI token part, the front end, and you know, different parts. So just breaking it down a little bit, it can only be a little bit helpful to people when they're trying to follow along. And I know it's a little sometimes nerve-wracking to let people peer into the work that you're doing, but I think like good communication will help these things, you know, because the key thing is when we're having these discussions in 4 or 5 months and people want to get more funding for the second half of the years, it's just much more, it's beneficial so that we've had these ways of tracking like all along. Let me, I'll add these. Probably not a little bit, but I'll put them there. Okay, and then for DXgov, we have these 5 right here. Hopefully you've been staring at the screen long enough so you don't need to hear me read them. But Ross, I think you had a couple things you wanted to say in terms of about execution.
Yeah, I was thinking we were spending more time sort of going through explaining what each of these were. So, but I'll briefly run through this just to not take up too much more time. I made some slides.
Nice. Yeah.
And I did think I would counter you with a Japanese phrase instead that is somewhat related. So this is just governance 2.0. And well, most people are pretty aware, but this also includes the 1.5 stepping stone. And along the lines of rivers and going across them, I thought stepping stone. So this is Kawadachi wa Kawade hateru, which is a slightly different meaning. It means if you spend time in the river, you're probably going to die in the river. So, you know, slightly different take on crossing rivers there. Basically, don't go into them for too long. So yeah, this was a pretty simple one. Yeah, very motivational. I think it's quite similar to Dave's of going across with stone shoes. So yeah, everyone kind of knows this, and as Chris already went over, it's pretty solidified as being important. And it's also already set as a deliverable for H1 in our budget. the other ones are where I wanted to explain things a bit more. So we have DAVI on-chain accessibility. It's if anyone caught the talk I did in Colombia, it's sort of along those lines of trying to make DAO, basically DAOs in general, more accessible for non-technical contributors. So all the accessible autonomy stuff. And yeah, it's kind of a big product differentiator. There's already stuff that we do well, but things we can improve on very easily, and they're on the roadmap as well for for improving that UX. But yeah, it also provides a very good way for us having a bit more interactivity with other protocols or potentially other products inside DXdao. Then there's the social UX stuff, which was a lot earlier. Certainly, it's had a lot less development time. We just pushed it out before we launched for internal guilds. But this kind of leads into more the ideas we're having with a flagship product and having this like more of this suite with the social aspects, and quite important to the stuff we were talking about in Colombia. So that's split off into another priority. And then DAVI's expansion, this is more like going beyond guilds and governance 2.0 into what other governance systems we want to add into DAVI, because the way we've been architecting it is that we can easily add on additional things. So things like governor or other, there's a reason there's a vampire on there. It's sort of a potentially good way of expanding and getting more users. Those were the 4 kind of things I broke it down into. Obviously, there's a lot more than that.
Awesome. I think it's really helpful. Even that first slide you had about like, this is why I go back to saying wording and phrasing is really important, because it's kind of like, well, we say governance 2.0, but what is that? And so is like governance 1.5 a priority and governance 2.0 is a priority, or is it like actually, yeah, 2.0 is it the stepping stone? The stepping stone to 2.0, and that just makes it easier for people to understand what's like, why are we working on 1.5 contracts if the priority is 2.0, when it's like, well, they're kind of, they're all tied together, right?
Yeah.
And also just kind of as you're thinking about this, like, you know, there's not any enforceability to this yet, but, you know, in a way you are kind of like pitching DXD and rep holders on like, these are the things that the priorities that we're working on, and like support them or vote for them. So you can see in the future that it's a good idea to make sure that we are explaining these priorities more. And I'm just like thinking more about it now. I definitely think the guild, like the terminology or these like the phrases we use, I think it's really important that the guilds themselves are like driving that terminology, just because it kind of fits into how you all are executing. Cool. We're almost done. Plowing through here. Next steps. That's great. Here's the other considerations slide that didn't, all that happened was it copied the next steps one. So summary notes and forum discussions, as we were saying, so 7 days from now, we'll be open for any new submissions for 2 days. And yeah, as I said, I think the wording changes are really important. Maybe we will not be using Google Form submissions. This is exciting based on Lewis's great presentation. And then, yeah, working on that polling app and DAVI integration, because I don't think that we're the only ones that need this. And I think it's another good example of like, if you can showcase governance or showcase an interesting tool, that's a way of getting people into the ecosystem. So I think there is, part of this that's kind of setting or selling it for future use, and hopefully for future use with DAVI. And so we'll do this again in about a month, maybe, probably a month, because we want to do it before ETH Denver. We'll be following up for the forum post and then info on how we can end up voting. But we'll have to, that may take a little bit of work to iron out, but that should be a good thing for us to do long term, because I think he can help us build that into what's functional for DXdao. Cool. Any final parting thoughts? Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, Chris. That was great.